Maya Johnson stared at the grade on her computer screen, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her advanced materials engineering project, the one she'd spent 6 weeks researching and developing, the one she'd tested and retested to ensure accuracy, had received a failing grade, 52 out of 100. She read Professor Walsh's comments: lacks originality, methodology is flawed, analysis is superficial, does not demonstrate graduate-level understanding of materials science principles. Maya felt tears of frustration threatening. This wasn't just any project. This was her junior year capstone, worth 30% of her grade. And she knew the work was solid. She'd consulted with graduate students, used advanced testing equipment, and followed every specification in the assignment guidelines. More concerning, this was the third time Professor Walsh had graded her significantly lower than she deserved. Her midterm exam, which she'd felt confident about, came back with a C-. A lab report she'd worked on with a study partner received a D for her, while her white partner received an A- on identical work. Maya had tried to tell herself it was coincidence, that she was being overly sensitive, that maybe her work really wasn't as strong as she thought. But deep down, she knew what was happening. Professor Walsh had decided before she'd even entered his classroom that she didn't belong there. What Maya didn't know, what Professor Richard Walsh couldn't possibly know, was that her father, Dr. Marcus Johnson, had just been appointed as Stanford University's new president. The announcement wouldn't be public for another week, but Dr. Johnson was already on campus, conducting what he called anonymous equity assessments before his official start date. Maya pulled out her phone and called her father. "Dad, I need your advice, not as the mutt, you know, just as my dad." Marcus Johnson was in his temporary office reviewing enrollment data when his daughter called. He heard the frustration and hurt in her voice immediately. "What happened, sweetheart?" Maya explained the situation, the pattern of unfair grades, Professor Walsh's dismissive attitude in class, the comments that suggested he didn't think she was capable of graduate-level work despite her being an undergraduate in a standard junior-level course. Marcus listened carefully, his jaw tightening with each detail. As a black man who'd navigated academia for 30 years, rising from assistant professor to department chair to dean and now university president, he knew exactly what his daughter was experiencing. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. "The graded assignments, the project specifications, maybe communications with the professor." "I have everything. I've been keeping copies because I had a feeling I might need to appeal." "Good. Don't do anything yet. I want you to follow the normal appeals process. Request a meeting with Professor Walsh first. Ask him to explain the grade in detail. Document that conversation." "Dad, he's not going to change the grade. He's tenured. He doesn't care." "I know, baby. But we need to follow procedure. And Maya, record the conversation if California law allows it. It's a one-party consent state. I can record without telling him. Then do it, and send me everything tonight. Every assignment, every grade, every comment. I want to see the full pattern." After hanging up, Marcus sat back in his chair and pulled up Professor Richard Walsh's faculty file. What he found was troubling. Walsh had been at Stanford for 28 years. He was a renowned materials scientist with numerous publications and research grants. He was also the subject of 17 informal complaints over the past decade, 15 of them from students of color who reported discriminatory grading and hostile classroom environments. Each complaint had been noted in his file, but never formally investigated. Walsh's research reputation and tenured status had apparently made him untouchable. That was about to change. Maya followed her father's advice. She emailed Professor Walsh, requesting an office hours appointment to discuss her project grade. Walsh responded tersely, "Office hours Tuesday 3 to 5 p.m. If you want to argue about your grade, bring documentation of why you think it's incorrect." Tuesday afternoon, Maya arrived at Walsh's office with her laptop, a folder of printed materials, and her phone recording audio in her pocket. She knocked on his door at 3:15 p.m. "Come in." Walsh's voice was already dismissive. His office was exactly what Maya expected. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, framed degrees from MIT and Cambridge, a desk cluttered with papers and half-drunk coffee. Walsh sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, not bothering to look up as she entered. "Professor Walsh, thank you for meeting with me. I wanted to discuss my advanced materials project grade." Walsh finally looked up, his expression making clear he considered this a waste of his time. "Miss Johnson, what seems to be the problem? I received a 52 on the project, but I believe there may be an error. I followed all the specifications, used appropriate methodology, and my analysis was based on current research in the field." Walsh picked up a printed copy of her project with his handwritten comments. "Your project demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of stress-strain relationships in composite materials. Your testing methodology was flawed, and your conclusions don't follow from your data." Maya opened her laptop. "May I show you my methodology? Because I followed the protocol exactly as outlined in Dr. Chen's materials testing guide, which you referenced in the assignment. I don't need to see your methodology again. I graded it based on what you submitted. But sir, I'm confused about your comment that my conclusions don't follow from my data. Could you point to a specific example?" Walsh's irritation was growing. "Miss Johnson, I've been teaching materials engineering for 28 years. I think I know when a project demonstrates adequate understanding of the subject matter. I'm not questioning your expertise, Professor. I'm trying to understand what I did wrong so I can improve." Walsh leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from irritated to condescending. "Let me be frank with you. You're a bright young woman, but engineering at this level requires a certain aptitude, a certain way of thinking that not everyone possesses. Sometimes students are admitted to programs for reasons other than pure academic merit, and they struggle to keep up with the rigorous demands." Maya felt like she'd been slapped. The implication was crystal clear. He thought she was an affirmative action admission. He thought she didn't belong. "Professor Walsh, I earned my place at Stanford. My SAT score was 1580. My high school GPA was 4.3. I've maintained a 3.7 in engineering. I'm not struggling academically. I'm being graded unfairly." "That's quite an accusation," Walsh said coldly. "Are you suggesting I'm discriminating against you?" "I'm suggesting that my work deserves a fair evaluation based on the assignment criteria, not on assumptions about whether I belong in this program." Walsh stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "I've explained my grading rationale. If you disagree with my assessment, you're welcome to file an appeal with the department chair, but I stand by my evaluation. A 52 accurately reflects the quality of your work." Maya gathered her materials, her hands shaking slightly. "I will be filing an appeal, and I'll be including documentation showing that my project met every requirement you specified. Do what you need to do, Miss Johnson. My door is always open to students who want to learn, but I won't change a grade just because a student thinks they deserve better." Maya left his office, went straight to her dorm room, and sent everything to her father: the recording, her project documentation, Walsh's grading rubric, and her analysis showing that she had met every stated requirement. Marcus listened to the recording 3 times. Each time his anger grew, not just at the unfair grade, but at the condescension, the barely coded language about certain aptitudes, and students admitted for reasons other than pure academic merit. He opened a new document and began writing, not as a father, but as a university president who'd just discovered a serious pattern of discrimination in his institution. The next morning, Marcus requested a meeting with Provost Ellen Martinez and the Dean of Engineering, Dr. David Kim. He didn't reveal his relationship to Maya. He presented the case as he'd present any case of potential academic discrimination brought to his attention during his equity assessment. "I'm reviewing patterns of grade distribution across departments," Marcus explained, pulling up data on the conference room screen. "I've identified several faculty members whose grading shows significant disparities based on student demographics. Professor Richard Walsh in materials engineering is one of the most concerning." He showed them the data. Over the past 5 years, Walsh's grades for Black and Latino students averaged 0.7 points lower than for white and Asian students with comparable GPAs and test scores. The disparity was even larger for Black female students. "This could be explained by various factors," Dean Kim said carefully. "Student performance, effort, preparation. It could," Marcus agreed, "except when you look at these students' performance in other courses, the disparity disappears. They perform at the same level as their peers in every class except Walsh's." He pulled up more data. "And here's where it gets interesting. I've found 17 informal complaints filed against Walsh over the past decade, 15 from students of color, all claiming discriminatory grading and hostile classroom environment. None were formally investigated." Provost Martinez leaned forward. "Why weren't they investigated?" Dean Kim looked uncomfortable. "Walsh is one of our most prominent researchers. His grants bring in millions. There was concern about damaging his reputation without clear evidence." So students' concerns were dismissed to protect a professor's research funding. Marcus's voice was sharp. That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what happened. Marcus pulled up another file. I've been conducting my own investigation. With student permission, I obtained recordings and documentation from several of Walsh's current students. The pattern is undeniable. He played excerpts from Maya's recording, not identifying her by name. Walsh's comments about certain aptitudes and students admitted for reasons other than pure academic merit filled the conference room. That's pretty clear bias, Provost Martinez said quietly. Marcus nodded. I want a formal Title VI investigation. I want Walsh's grades from the past 5 years reviewed by an independent committee, and I want him removed from teaching while the investigation is conducted. Dean Kim hesitated. Marcus, Walsh is tenured. We can't just remove him from teaching without cause. The faculty union. I just gave you cause. 17 complaints, statistical evidence of grade discrimination, recorded evidence of bias statements. If the university doesn't act on this, we're complicit in the discrimination. Recorded evidence of bias statements. If the university doesn't act on this, we're complicit in the discrimination. What about the students he's currently teaching? Provost Martinez asked. Classes are reassigned, students are given the option to have their grades reviewed by an independent evaluator, and we make clear that this university takes discrimination seriously. The investigation was launched within a week. An external committee was brought in to review Walsh's grading patterns, student complaints, and course materials. Maya's identity was protected, her case presented as one of many showing similar patterns. Walsh initially dismissed the investigation as political correctness run amok. He claimed his grading was rigorous and fair, that lower-performing students were looking for excuses. He had the support of some senior faculty, who saw the investigation as an attack on academic freedom. But as the evidence mounted, Walsh's defense became harder to maintain. The independent review committee found that Black and Latino students in his classes were, wise 63% more likely to receive failing grades on projects, given less detailed feedback on assignments, called on less frequently in class discussions, more likely to have their questions dismissed or answered curtly. The committee reviewed Maya's project specifically, comparing it to projects from white students who'd received A grades. They found her work to be technically superior in several aspects, with more thorough analysis and better documentation. Their conclusion was unambiguous. Professor Walsh's grading of this project appears to be based on bias rather than academic merit. The student met or exceeded all stated requirements, yet received a failing grade while other students with objectively weaker work received passing or high grades. 3 months after the investigation began, Richard Walsh was offered a choice: retire with partial benefits or face termination proceedings. His tenure could protect his position, but it couldn't protect him from the evidence of systemic discrimination. Walsh chose retirement, issuing a statement claiming he was leaving because the university no longer valued rigorous academic standards. The day after Walsh's retirement was announced, Marcus invited Maya to his now official office as university president. It was the first time they'd discussed the case since it began. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Maya sat down, still processing everything that had happened. "I'm okay. Dr. Chen is teaching the course now. She's actually reviewing everyone's grades from the semester to see if Walsh's bias affected others. And your project? Dr. Chen regraded it. I got a 94. She said it was one of the best undergraduate projects she'd seen this year." Marcus felt a wave of pride. "I never doubted that. Dad, I know you had to do this as the president, but I need to know, did you do it because it was the right thing, or because I'm your daughter?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "I did it because it was the right thing. The data showed clear discrimination. The complaints were documented. The evidence was overwhelming. Any university president would have been obligated to act." He paused. "But would I have looked as hard at the data if you hadn't called me that day?" "Maybe not. Maybe Walsh's discrimination would have continued for another 5 years before someone with power noticed. So yes, you being my daughter meant the issue got attention faster, but the response was based on the evidence, not on our relationship." Maya nodded slowly. "Some students are saying I only got justice because of who my dad is." "They're partially right," Marcus admitted. "You had access to resources and advocacy that other students didn't. That's privilege, even as you were experiencing discrimination. The question is, what do you do with that awareness?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could see this as just about you getting a fair grade, or you could see it as exposing a problem that was affecting dozens of students who didn't have a university president for a father. The investigation helped all of them, not just you." Maya thought about this. "So I use my privilege to help others who don't have it." "Exactly. That's how you honor the position you're in." Over the next year, Maya became involved in student advocacy around academic equity. She worked with the university's diversity office to create better reporting systems for discriminatory grading. She mentored younger students of color in engineering, and she used her voice to speak up when she saw bias, knowing that her father's position gave her protection many students didn't have. The university implemented sweeping changes: regular audits of grade distributions by demographics, mandatory training on unconscious bias for all faculty, a clear process for investigating discrimination complaints that couldn't be dismissed or delayed because of a professor's research status. Some faculty resisted, claiming the changes infringed on academic freedom, but Marcus was clear: academic freedom means freedom to pursue research and teach without political interference. It doesn't mean freedom to discriminate. Fair grading isn't a limitation on your freedom, it's a basic requirement of the job. 2 years after the Walsh case, Stanford's retention rates for students of color in engineering improved significantly. Exit surveys showed students felt more supported, more fairly evaluated, and more confident that complaints would be taken seriously. At Maya's graduation, as she walked across the stage to receive her engineering degree with honors, Marcus watched from the audience with pride. Not just because she'd succeeded academically, but because she'd used a painful experience to create change for others. After the ceremony, a young black woman approached Maya. "I just wanted to say thank you. I was in Walsh's class the semester before everything happened. He failed me on a project I know was good. I appealed, but nothing happened. When your case came out and they reviewed his grading, they found my project and re-evaluated it. I got the grade I deserved, and it changed my GPA enough that I could stay in the engineering program." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm graduating today because of what you did, because you had the courage and the resources to fight back. So thank you." Maya hugged her. "I'm glad it helped, and I'm sorry you had to go through that." After the woman left, Maya turned to her father. "That's what you meant, isn't it? About using privilege to help others?" Marcus nodded. "That's exactly what I meant. You experienced discrimination, but you had resources to address it. She experienced the same discrimination, but didn't have those resources until your case exposed the problem. Do you think Walsh ever understood what he did wrong? I don't know. Some people never do. They see consequences for their actions and blame everyone but themselves. What matters isn't whether Walsh changed, but whether the system changed to protect future students from people like him." 5 years after the Walsh case, Maya was in graduate school at MIT, pursuing her PhD in materials engineering. She'd written a paper about bias in academic assessment that was published in a major education journal. She'd become a sought-after speaker on equity in STEM education. And Richard Walsh, in his retirement, had become a cautionary tale used in diversity trainings across the country as an example of how unchecked bias can harm students and ultimately destroy careers. Whether he'd learned from the experience, no one knew. But the students he'd harmed had gotten justice, the system had improved, and future students had better protection. That was what mattered. Not one professor's redemption, but a shift in how institutions responded to discrimination. And it had all started with a brilliant young engineering student who refused to accept an unfair grade, and a university president who chose to use his power to create systemic change rather than just solve one problem for his daughter.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.